Now, it's really hard doing these complete sign from start to finish because we have a 24-hour wait period for our graphics to dry after we put on our Mod Podge graphics. So we're just doing it step by step here. And this is done on a piece of old scrap plywood. I gave it a really chippy paint finish with some black chalk paint, and then I put on some Vaseline, and then I put on some orange acrylic paint, and then I put on some salt, and then I waited for everything to dry, put on some green acrylic paint, sprinkled in some salt while it was still wet, let that dry, and then I put some white chalk paint on top, scraped it all off. So as we're working away on the sign, you're going to see that canvas underneath of my paint show up through the sign. And all of these techniques, I have full tutorials on my channel, so you can see how to do them. So we've kind of hopped right through to the taking off the paper portion of making a wooden sign with Mod Podge. And this is all that I use. Mod Podge matte. I printed off my graphics. So this is the graphic that I used. Farm Fresh Pumpkins. This is available in my Etsy store. And actually, I've already put the link down below in the description to this specific graphic. If you want to grab it and try a sign like this, it's over there. So it's a Farm Fresh Pumpkins. And what I did, I put this in my Google Docs and I sized it to fit my piece of wood. I have a tutorial on how to size graphics. Afterwards, I'll put that link down below in the description too. I enlarged it to fit my piece of wood. Made sure I used my reverse file, because when you're doing this technique, you want to make sure you're reversing your files. Placed it where I wanted it, added the Mod Podge, and then I let it sit overnight. This is just regular computer paper that I printed on with my laser printer. It will also work on a inkjet printer, but it's much easier if you have a laser printer. It's not as much work. Now I glued these together. Because sometimes I just do this by the seat of my pants and I don't take my time and measure very well. So by taping these together, I know my words are going to be where they need to be. So we're just going to rip that tape off. This is just some packing tape that I used when I was putting these graphics together. And I designed all of these graphics myself, the ones that are in my Etsy store. I love designing graphics. It is so much fun and I find it really relaxing. I'll sit on the couch, put a YouTube video on of some of my favorite crafting friends, and just design away and make graphics. And I have a lot of fun doing that. A dish of water and a little rag. That's all you need. Take the rag. I like to start in the middle of the graphic. Just wet it so you can start to see the graphics show through. And this is the cheapest computer paper you can buy. This is just the Amazon basic computer paper. If you're using a computer paper that's really thick, it's going to be really difficult to rub off, and it's just extra paper that you have to rub off. So find the cheapest paper that you can and it'll work the best for you. One of the best things to do is if you follow me over on Instagram or Facebook, you can send me pictures over there. So if you're having an issue with this technique and you send me a picture of it, I can look at it and within 2 or 3 seconds, I usually know where it went wrong and I can guide you through it. A really easy technique that you don't have to spend a lot of money on to make signs. And I sell a lot of these. You don't need to have a Cricut. You don't need to have stencils. All you need is a computer, some computer paper, Mod Podge, and a printer. And most people already have a computer and they already have a printer. Head to Amazon or head to a craft store, pick up some Mod Podge and try this technique and just kind of give it a go. Now, this technique is never ever perfect. It's always something that's going to be a very rustic look. It's almost like a farmhouse kind of vintage or antique looking sign. If you're looking for something to be perfect, this is not going to be the technique for you. This is going to be, there's going to be, like you can see here, little pieces that are going to rub off here and there. And, but I think that's what gives it character. That's what I like so much about this technique is that rustic feel. Now you can see I'm not using my little rag anymore. I'm just dipping my finger in the water and just doing a small section and rubbing that paper off now as we go. How many of you have tried this? Let me know in the comments. Have you tried this technique and have you had success or not? And also, if you've made some signs, tag me in your Instagram stories or your Facebook, and then I can see them if you tag me. When I'm doing a technique tutorial or a teaching tutorial, it doesn't help very much if I'm teaching you and then you're having a problem and all of a sudden I'm gone. You don't know, you can't, I'm nowhere to be found. I've put this video out into the universe and you can't make it work and I'm long gone. I don't think that's very fair. So I really, really try to guide people along if they want to try this technique and to help them out, because that's what I'm all about. And if I can help you figure this out and you can start making signs and you can start making some money on the side or gifts for family or friends or have a craft night with your girlfriends. I want to make sure that you're not going to have any issues with it and you can do it and have fun with it. So my big thing on my channel is to be very supportive with my followers, and it's nice when I get those replies because I know that I'm doing a pretty good job trying anyways, and I get hundreds and hundreds of messages because I have very big platforms on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. So Facebook's a little bit harder to get through because there's a lot of messages that come through there. So if you want to get a fast reply, probably Instagram or YouTube are my two easiest platforms to get a hold of me the quickest. So as I'm rubbing away, you can see that painted background now underneath the sign, and you can see how I kind of made that chippy base of the sign and it's showing through underneath the graphics. I really like taking a little bit of extra time to do a different kind of painting technique when I'm making my signs, especially if you're going to sell them, because they're going to sell better. I just find it doesn't have a lot of character. So I always take an extra half an hour or so waiting for paint to dry, etc. When I'm making a sign, especially if I'm making a big one, do some special painting techniques on it first and then make it into a sign, and I think it looks much better. One of my most popular fall and Halloween DIYs from this year and last year was I took some 2x4s and I cut them into squares about this big, painted them with some orange chalk paint, and then added my jack-o'-lantern faces. They're so adorable and they're so easy to make, and most of the time they're just scrap 2x4s that I have gotten. That's a really great DIY to do for this time of year. So if you haven't seen that video, you can go back in my playlists and you can find it, and it's a lot of fun. And the jack-o'-lantern faces are in my Etsy store too. If you are a Patreon member of my graphics club, you have a 70% off discount code, and if you're a channel member, you have your 50% off discount code. So if you're buying something out of my Etsy store, make sure you're using those codes because it really helps out with the cost of graphics. I'm going to start up here on the Farm Fresh. There we go. And just rub the paper off. This is where I mean about it being rustic. So see how I lost that little bit of the bottom of the F right there? That happens. That just happens. There's nothing, you haven't done anything wrong. That's just the nature of this technique and what gives it the rustic look. But I also was using the little rag, and sometimes it's just a little bit too aggressive and you can't feel how hard you're rubbing. So that could have also been the reason too. I couldn't feel right there, and I rubbed it a bit too hard, and then I lifted the graphic off. So just be careful if you're using the rag for that top layer. I always stick to my fingers. And now with my fingers, I can feel the paper balling up underneath. So I know if I've got, like when I rub right here, there's no paper. I can feel it's all gone. I'm up here. I can still feel that there's paper underneath my finger and that I need to keep rubbing. If you're using a inkjet, you can still do this technique. You just have to be really careful with not using much water. When you're using an inkjet and you're introducing water onto the inkjet ink, it has a tendency to want to run. So you have to be really careful, almost do like a dry rub on it. It's not perfect. And if you're going to be making these signs to sell, it takes a lot longer. It might be worthwhile in investing in a laser printer. And laser printers are not as expensive as they used to be. I have one right now, mine actually, and I can put the link down below. It's $199 on Amazon, which if you're turning this into a business is a really good investment. So if you want to do a lot of these signs and using this technique, invest in a laser printer. It'll be so much better for you. We're doing pretty good here. And I'm gonna just keep working away here, and you guys can keep watching. I hope you don't get bored. Because like I said before, I think it's really good for you to see me in real time doing this technique and seeing how long it actually takes to do it. Now, after this is done, I actually, out in my shed, I cut some wooden pieces to go around the outside. So once I have this all done, I'm going to take this outside. I'll nail it on. Now this little letter is wanting to lift on me a little bit, so I'm going to be really gentle on it. It's just wanting to lift up a little bit there. So I'm going to go really lightly there. That's pretty good with a light finger, so we don't take any more off. There, that looks good. I could just take this, I could coffee stain it, I could decoupage it, I could just frame it. But if you're doing this technique, you have to reverse it. And so this is not reversed. If I was going to use this, it would have to be the reverse file and then put it down on our piece of wood. If you're buying this graphic out of my Etsy store, one of the files is already reversed. So you don't need to worry about that. You already have your reverse file there. If you're designing your own graphics, make sure that you know how to reverse them, because you don't want to make one of these signs and forget to reverse them and then waste all of your time. Sometimes what happens when you're doing this technique, people will say, I can see the outline of where I put the graphic. The first thing that probably has happened is you've used too much Mod Podge. If you have used too much Mod Podge is thick. As you can see, it's a thick substance. So when you're putting it on your sign, and if you're putting a thick layer on it, letting it dry, when you're rubbing it off, you're going to have that thick outline all the way around your graphic. You do not need to use very much Mod Podge at all. You just need a really thin coat on your paper and then lay it down. And I think that will help you get rid of that paper edge look. The other thing is, if you're not using a white background, see now I've got another piece here that rubbed off a little bit. That's okay. That happens with this technique. Another thing is, if you're not using a white background, you're going to be able to see the outline of the graphic more, because Mod Podge does not dry completely clear. It has like an opaque dryness to it when it's finished. So if you say you're doing it on an orange background, you're going to see that opaque Mod Podge dried on top of that orange. And it just doesn't work that well. So if you're just beginning, I always recommend to do a white chalk paint background. And then that way it's going to blend into your sign better. As you get more advanced and doing more signs, then you can venture into using some colored backgrounds, because you just get the feel of rubbing and how much Mod Podge to use, and that will help you. But in the beginning, use a white background, and that will also help get rid of that outline. It 100% works best with chalk paint. It does not work well at all with latex paint. It will work with acrylic paint, but it's a little bit more tricky. But if you don't want to have any problems, you're best to stick with a chalk painted surface. So the chalk paint is porous, and when you're putting on the Mod Podge, you want that Mod Podge to soak into that chalk paint to do the transfer. If you're using a latex paint, that Mod Podge is just going to sit on top of that latex paint, because latex paint is latex, and you're not going to get a good transfer. You're going to rub the graphic right off. Acrylic paint, I'm not quite sure why it doesn't work as well with acrylic paint, but it does work better than the latex paint. If you're doing this, use a chalk paint. And I have a really affordable chalk paint recipe on my channel, if you haven't gotten any chalk paint, that you can try, and it works great with this technique. Now here's another piece. You can see right, so here's the issue that I did right here. And I might save this and I'll add it later. I probably missed this little portion with Mod Podge when I put it on the sign. And actually, it doesn't even look that bad. I probably don't need to add it in here. But when it's along the edge like that, it usually means that I didn't get enough Mod Podge right out to the edge of the paper to do the transfer. But I'll set that aside, and I might add that later. I can just go back in and put a little bit of Mod Podge on that little piece right there, place it back down, and then let it sit and dry, and then rub the paper off. But I don't think it actually looks too bad. You can definitely use colored ink. I just don't have a colored laser printer. I'm actually in the market for one. I've been looking for one. When I find one and I know it's going to work really well, I'll give you some recommendations. But right now, I just have my black ink laser printer. And if I'm going to do anything color, then I do have an inkjet printer. So I'll go and I'll use my inkjet for any color. But definitely it will work for color if you have the laser color printer. This P here is giving me trouble. So I'm just going very lightly, because I don't want to lose any more of that. Now you can go in with a paint marker or a little bit of black acrylic paint, and you can touch it up, but I always find it doesn't really blend in that well. You can tell that it's been painted on top of it. So I try to avoid that as much as I can. But we're pretty close to having this done. So now I'm just going to go around and just see if I've got any places where I missed. I've got it cleaned up pretty good. So my next step now, I'll do it off camera, we'll wrap this up soon, is I will seal this with a water-based polyacrylic sealer. You can seal your signs with Mod Podge. It's not my preference. I find I don't like the look of Mod Podge as a top coat. I prefer a polyacrylic sealer. And if you have a little bit of cloudiness that's still left, when you introduce that polyacrylic sealer on top of it, a lot of that will go away, and it will blend in, and you won't see a lot of that cloudiness. Now I was able to get a lot of it off. As it dries, that cloudiness shows up, and you can just go in and spot rub here and there where you need to. So now I can take my hand and I can feel, I think I got this pretty clean. I don't feel much paper anymore. So what do you guys think? I love this graphic. So we've taken this, enlarged it, reversed it, turned it into this, and we've turned it into a really beautiful fall sign that you can keep up through September and October. And like I said, I've got some wooden pieces of trim that I'm going to put around the outside to finish it off. And I love it. You can pick this graphic up in my Etsy store. The link for this exact graphic is down in the description. Make sure if you're a Patreon graphic member, if you've been a Patreon member for a little bit, you've already gotten this graphic. You've gotten it with your emails. And if you're a channel member, you're going to have your 50% off code. So make sure you use that. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. It was helpful. I've given you some inspiration. Like I said before, you can message me if you're having issues over on Facebook or Instagram, and you can also send me pictures there and I can guide you along. So I'm going to sign off. Thanks a lot, everyone, and we'll see you in the next video.